we're back with a special bonus VIP panel, funding and finances. This panel and the VIP options are sponsored by CUNA Mutual Group, Cmfg Ventures, an incredible partner based out of Madison, Wisconsin, which is where our live version of the event was supposed to be and where it will be again next year, August 15th through 17th, 2021. Knock on wood, but if you are a woman leader, if you are interested in finance, you need to check out CUNA Mutual Group, Cmfg Ventures. They have amazing things going on, empowering women in leadership, empowering women in finance. So go check them out in the exhibit booth, check out their website, and get connected however you can. But I'm honored to be able to present this panel with them. And I'm going to turn it over to an intro video from CEO of CUNA Mutual Group, Bob Trunzo, and then we'll come back with some questions for this amazing panel.
Welcome to the P5 Women's Summit panel discussion. Hi, I'm Bob Trunzo, CEO and President of CUNA Mutual Group, and I'm grateful to be here. Well, we've been around a long time at CUNA Mutual, over 85 years. So we're certainly, and we don't qualify as a startup, but you don't get to hang around for 85 years and be a successful business without embracing some innovation. Cmfg Ventures, our venture capital arm, allows us to maintain a startup mentality and entrepreneurial spirit. Our venture group supports and invests in emerging technologies and services that bring the latest and best to our customers to help them achieve success. So when we heard about this event today, we really wanted to be a part of it because these values you hold, well, it's the same values we hold. We value innovation, we value diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm proud to say, last year we were named a winning organization by Women on Boards. To qualify, 20% of our board needed to be comprised of women. At CUNA Mutual Group, 40% of our board and 40% of our executive vice presidents are women. But you know, we've got more work to do, just like everybody else. Recent events have reminded us that the opportunities sometimes, most of the time, look very different for women, racial minorities, and other marginalized people than they do for white men in this country. One of the areas we're committed to is attracting, retaining, and promoting diverse talent. That means more women, people of color, and LGBTQ employees in the company and for our leadership roles. Speaking of leadership, wow, really impressed and encouraged by all of you. What a great group of talented, driven, and engaged women. I hope we get the opportunity to work with many of you in the future. And this panel discussion we're about to witness is going to be pretty cool. Talk about a top-notch group of people. Arlen Hamilton is the founder of Backstage Capital, a venture capital firm dedicated to minimizing funding disparities in tech by investing in high-performing founders who are people of color, women, and LGBTQ. Jeff Hoffman, entrepreneur, CEO, motivational speaker, best-selling author, and Hollywood film producer. And I'm especially proud of the panelists from the CUNA Mutual family. Laurie Sievert, a talented corporate development analyst from CUNA Mutual Ventures. She has a perspective, obviously, of being a woman, young in career, but in a field traditionally dominated by men. And my good friend, Laurie Winger, who I've known since 2005, she's going to tell you her story from intern to chief financial officer, executive vice president of product development. Laurie is one of the highest ranking females in the insurance industry in the United States. I can't wait to hear what they have to say, what all of them have to say. So let's get at it. And thank you for being here today and enjoy the panel discussion.
Thanks so much, Bob. And again, thank you to CUNA Mutual Group and Cmfg Ventures. They're an amazing supporter of women in leadership, women in finance, women in entrepreneurship. And we're just so grateful to have them as a partner for this event because we're excited to bring value to so many people here today, especially in a virtual way where we can reach an even larger audience. So welcome to Laurie, Jeff, Arlen, and Laura, I'm excited to have you all here and share some of your best finance and funding tips. So, Laurie, let's start with you. Over the span of 30 years, your role and responsibilities grew from being an intern, as Bob mentioned, to becoming the first female CFO in CUNA Mutual Group's 85-year history. I mean, that's a pretty huge accomplishment. Can you talk a little bit about the path that you've taken in your career and any of the principles that have guided you along the way? Any leadership lessons you'd like to share with some entrepreneurs or executives in training or executives that are already there today?
Sure, I'd love to. Thanks for the opportunity. A couple of thoughts. First, when I think about my career path, it was probably a little winding and not as traditional as some people as they get to the CFO chair. So I started at CUNA Mutual, as Bob mentioned, in 1990 as an intern, and I have been there ever since. First 18 years of my career were actually in a variety of finance roles, and then following that, I took a job as a product leader. And that's one of the pivotal points in my career and one of the leadership lessons that I have learned over time. And the key there for me was to step outside of my comfort zone and take a role that was a lot different from what I had been doing previously. And I think that's what set me up to be able to come back to finance ultimately and lead the finance team, is that I stepped outside of finance and got a very different perspective. Another leadership lesson that I've learned over time is to make sure that you have the right team in place to work with you. So what I do typically when I take on a new team is to sit down with the group and tell them what my expectations are up front, ask them for questions. I go through a leadership integration session with my team every time I take on a new team. And I really find that those are some good ways to make sure that you have the right people on your team and that everybody's rowing in the right direction.
I love it. That's an amazing story. And you're right that a lot of people think that the path to success is, intern to CFO and it goes like that. But I'm glad that you mentioned that it was a much curvier path than you first thought in the beginning. Arlen, let's go to you. You have an incredible story and, you shared a little bit of that in the previous session with Stephanie Mehta. But you built everything from scratch. Can you talk a little bit more in depth about what your journey was like? Was it more of a straight line, or what were some of the twists, like Laurie mentioned, in your journey to going from where you were to this incredible venture capital fund and everything you have in the works today?
Yeah, definitely wasn't linear. And I also didn't come from the corporate world. I consider myself to be quite unemployable. But, have a great work ethic and also really like getting good at my jobs. I've been working since I was 15 years old when I started working for a pizza place, But I always would find things at the companies that I felt could be better. And I never felt positioned to bring that to anyone's attention. And so when I set out to build Backstage, in addition to building it to invest in other people, I also had to think about internally what the company would be like and what it would, what would the foundation of Backstage itself be. And when I looked at what that would be, I just thought, what is a company that I've always wanted to work for? What is a company that, who is a leader that I've always respected, or can I take from people I've worked for and take the good and the bad and construct leadership from that? And so that's what I've attempted to do every step of the way. And it's really fun when you're building something from scratch. You take on all the risk and the responsibility, but the upside is that you get to build it as you see fit in the world. And then I think it's your responsibility to then attract others by example and by showing a certain level of integrity and how you put yourself out there in the world the way that you're going to be behind the scenes. So I try to match those two as well.
Amazing. I never get tired of listening to new parts of your story. I said that earlier. I can read your book and listen to your podcast and listen to a million of your interviews, but there's just always something that is incredible and I take away from it. So Jeff, let's go over to you. I don't know if I ever mentioned this to you about this event, but we have over 20 powerhouse female speakers, multi-million-dollar entrepreneurs, New York Times bestselling authors, Fortune 500 executives, and Jeff Hoffman, the only guy in the entire lineup, which was not an accident by any means. Jeff Hoffman, incredible entrepreneur, investor, philanthropist. I had the privilege of first meeting him speaking at a conference actually in Iowa before I lived there. And I was just blown away with the advice he shared and his incredible support for women in entrepreneurship and leadership across the globe, literally. And he is just traveling all over and you know, a lot of guys out there that have reached levels of success talk about empowering women and why that's important, but not as many actually walk the walk and take action on it. And Jeff is an incredible example of, you know, using his privilege and taking action and doing so many incredible things across the world to support women in entrepreneurship and women in leadership. So Jeff, can you give a little bit about your background and what you have going on right now with supporting women's global entrepreneurship?
Sure, and thank you. I am proud to be here for you. I am so proud of you and everything you've done. And from the very first day you ever talked about this summit to this amazing reality with all these incredible women, I couldn't be more proud of you. Congratulations. So I'm happy to be here for you. I'll make the career part short because that's not what's important. What I'd rather talk about is things we're doing to support women around the world. But I'm a longtime serial entrepreneur. Like Arlen, I was unemployable too, even though I gave it a shot. But I've been, since my 20s, been building startups and scaling them. My very first startup very quickly was when you go to an airport and you check yourself into a kiosk and get your own boarding pass. That was my first invention when I was 20-something years old and unemployed. And sold those to airports all over the world. Since then, I've been building companies. We've had our successes and failures. Our most notable successes that I've been part of are Priceline.com, Booking.com, Ubid.com. These are all companies we built and took public that became multi-billion-dollar companies. But I would really rather talk about what I'm doing now because now I work with women in business literally all over the world in two capacities. One of those is I'm the chairman of the Global Entrepreneurship Network, genglobal.org. And at Global Entrepreneurship Network, we have people on the ground in 180 countries with one really simple mission, which is to help anybody, anywhere, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, or anything, that wants to start a company and gain economic independence and freedom to be able to do so. So our teams are all over the world. I gave a talk to women entrepreneurs across like 48 African countries yesterday, or excuse me, on Saturday. But that's what we do at Global Entrepreneurship Network. We help people start businesses to gain independence. The other one I'll just mention quickly is called the Unreasonable Group. And Jenna, that is based on a quote from George Bernard Shaw about the fact that reasonable people adapt to the world around them. Unreasonable people expect the whole world to adapt to them. Therefore, all progress is dependent upon unreasonable people. So we formed Unreasonable Group to find all the people out there crazy enough to think they can change the world and help them do it. And so we work with incredible women. In fact, now in our portfolio, there's 200 startups doing business in 187 countries. And this is probably what I'm most proud of in terms of enabling women around the world to make an impact. We have raised across these companies a combined $4.1 billion in financing for all these startups in this portfolio. And they have positively impacted over 350 million lives. It's all this organization's all social entrepreneurship. And, you know, we're 50-50 male and female. So proud to be here. Thanks for having me.
You guys hear why I love Jeff? Just so many. I mean, I love every single speaker that is a part of this whole event, but there's a reason there is only one guy for this first one. And I think that shows you how come it's Jeff. But thank you so much for being here. All right, let's jump to Laura. You're a little bit earlier in your career than some of the other folks here. So as an emerging leader at a young professional in CUNA Mutual Group, what have you learned so far? What lessons can you offer? what's it like being a younger female in the venture capital world, and how can people be successful getting into that market?
Yeah, so I often get asked, how did you get to where you are? It's not an easy industry to get into, as Arlen can attest. But not only that, it is incredibly focused on white men. So, it's been an interesting couple of years being in this industry as a young female. I'm going to try and be as honest as possible as to what that's looked like, but it's not always pretty. And, I think one thing that I'm trying to learn and am learning is, in the first couple of years, I wanted to fit into the venture capital world, which means going to all the best conferences, networking with all the best people. But the reality is that those environments are often pretty backwards and not inclusive of a lot of people. And so, learn to wear a wedding ring to conferences, because I would be the only person in the room as a young female. And so, realizing that's not the industry that I want to work in. And so what does that look like to try and be building something better and different for the future, knowing that it's tough right now in venture capital to be a woman. And then, on top of my experience, I have a lot of privilege being a white woman in this space. So what does it look like to be a woman of color or LGBTQ? The reality is that there just is not space in this industry. And so, the first couple of years, I wanted to fit into those spaces that I felt really uncomfortable in, instead of trying to look for the people that were doing something different. So the networks that were outside of the traditional, Stanford, Harvard networks. There's a statistic that says the majority of people in venture capital come from just Stanford and Harvard. So it's just, there's a lot of things about venture capital that are backwards, and I think I constantly am shaking my head at, is this still true? Is this, I'm young, this can't be right, but it is. And so what does it look like to be a young female in this space and not accept the status quo, and not accept that that is okay, that I am wearing a wedding ring so that I don't get, inappropriate comments. I think a lot of times young men are seen as trailblazers, and young women are seen as, or are tokenized, commoditized, and sexualized. And so just, this is not acceptable. And even though there is so much more I want to do in my career, I think there's a narrative that you have to make it before you help others make it. But I want to say no to that. I'm learning how to say no to that. And that there are things that young professionals can do and can stand up against, instead of just accepting in this space.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that experience, Laura. Yeah, hey, you got an applause from Arlen. That's big,
Yeah,
Laura.
that's that energy right there. That's what I'm going for. I love that. You said everything.
What do you have to add to that, Arlen?
I just think that, that's just so refreshing to me. It's so honest. It's so real. I've had to do the wedding ring thing just because I'm gay and not have, others, it's just it's so dumb, but it's real. And I love that you recognized it. You understood where you started. You recognized something's not right here. And then you didn't sort of leave it and let it stay that way. And you also didn't, conform to it. It's like I always think you can stir some stuff up from the inside. And I love that about what you're doing.
What do you have to add, Jeff?
Oh,
I don't think we can hear you.
There we go. Very, very quickly.
Hey, there he is.
Something really, really important. She said, you have to speak up against this. And that is why I'm here. Men can't sit idly by when these kinds of things happen. I walked out on a huge deal and a contract because of the way a CEO spoke to my head of marketing. She was a woman. I let her give the pitch. He said, why is she giving the pitch and not you? And the implication about that is because I'm a white male, I guess I would do it better. And I said, because she knows this stuff and she's smarter than me. And he gave a pitch and he said, any questions? She said, Michelle said, any questions? And this guy said, yeah, what are you doing later? And I said, I can tell you what we're doing right now. And I stood up and I said, we're walking out and doing business with somebody else. Men can't sit idly by. She was absolutely right. People got to speak up when they see the kind of behavior that makes women not want to be in finance.
Yeah, I think you're all right on point. Laurie, I think this is a good transition maybe to someone as an executive in a large financial organization. Things might be starting to go a little bit more in the right direction or have a little bit of change, but you still don't see many, female executives or, people of color in executive leadership roles within financial services. So I'm curious to hear about what you and CUNA Mutual Group are doing to, lift up diverse leaders in that space and be an industry leader.
Great. So you heard Bob mention 40% of our senior executive team and 40% of our board members are female. And we have another 10% on each of those that is a person of color. But that has been a very deliberate change that Bob has made since he took over. So one of the first programs he created was our diversity, equity, and inclusion program within the organization. He added inclusion as a corporate value. So we previously had 7 corporate values and we added an 8th so that he could tell the organization how important it was to him to have diversity among the leadership. And we've made some progress there, but we're still learning, right? So we have difficult conversations all the time about the promotion rate of white females, for example, from director to officer versus males. And we actually had a balanced scorecard that we've been using for several years where we're tracking that. Is the rate different? Is the rate different between promotions of women and promotions of men? But it's a constant battle that we're fighting. The nice thing is, just like Laura shared how she's feeling in the venture space, we talk about it openly. And I think that's really important. And it's helped make a difference for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. You guys are obviously an industry leader and are an organization that acts and puts their money and their actions towards what they actually say is important. And I think that's such a differentiator in today's market. It's really easy to say that you support things or want to back things, but until you actually put your metrics and your budgets and your actions behind it, it's not anything except a, nice thing to put on a marketing brochure. So, Arlen, obviously Backstage Capital is created around this idea of investing and getting more funding to underrepresented founders. Why is it so crucial for our future, and what criteria and parameters do you use when you select these investments? And have you seen any difference in how you find this pipeline versus other larger firms that might not focus on that audience?
Okay, well, so it is important. I mean, this is what we're built on. Someone asked me last week during an event if I would be in venture or investing, I guess, in general, if I could only invest in white men, even if they're going to be like really successful. And I was like, no, I'm good. No. I'll be all right. You know what I mean? I do enjoy money. I have a good relationship now with money, but no. So this is really my life's work. And I think it's important because of so much we can see how much can change in 5 years and in 2 years. And 6 years ago, when I went out starting like 9 years ago, but 6 years ago, as recently as then, people would be in these hushed tones talking about diversity in venture and tech and startup world. And I would get, people saying, you're making too much noise about this. We don't talk about this here. You can't do that. And today, you can't not talk about it. You're considered odd out if you're not at least seeming like you're addressing the situation. And now more and more, you have to actually be backing that up. And so I think it's important because it makes change. It makes a real change. And I have to have that optimism to fuel me. And I tend to be an optimistic person, although I definitely see it how it is. You know, it's not where it should be, but it can get better, I think. As an investor, I'm looking for a lot of things and simple things. So I'm looking for across sort of the canvas, many things. One way I've started really distilling down what I'm looking for that's been helpful to me is that I'm going to be turning 40 this year in October. And, you know, you start to think about things in a different way, I think, starting around now. About what time you have and what you're going to do with that time. And so I like the idea of looking for companies and founders who are working on things that it would take me at least a decade or more to crack myself. You know, I think of myself as a founder who is looking for other founders. And that is one great mark for me is, do I feel like this is bold, audacious, interesting, necessary enough that it would take, I could go towards this, but it would take me a decade or more. So that way, every single check I write, no matter how small or, you know, they're getting bigger and bigger these days, every single check I write can have that impact. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like a civic impact or sustainable impact, but they can have this sort of just quality of life impact as deep as it is far, right? And to me, that's really exciting. But I'm also, of course, looking for founders who are strong. I'm pattern matching. I've mentioned pattern matching before. I'm pattern matching from a different pattern. Sorry, my printer decided to start and it scared me. Yeah, there you go. It's been a long time in quarantine, y'all. So I'm pattern matching for that. And so I'm looking for someone who is going to just set my soul ablaze, you know, like just really interesting stuff. There's so much out there. That's why I said earlier in the fireside before, don't just go after something because you think it's going to make you a lot of money or you think that's the hot industry for the year. Even these think pieces about what's going to happen after COVID, and people are like, okay, I'm going to start this type of company. It has to be in your DNA. It has to be in the makeup of who you are. And you can see that from people. You can see that from people starting very early on, and they don't have to look great on paper either. They don't have to have come from certain school, no shade to Stanford nor Harvard, but they don't have to come from that in my world, because I didn't go to college. And so there's that. And I think you asked about, and of course there's plenty of more that has to do with like what you're actually working on and how the numbers add up and what you've done so far and all sorts of things that I talk about a great deal in the book and also in general in interviews. But you asked about how is our pipeline or deal flow different, or how is the way we approach it different? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Since day one, it's been a very open process. So if you go to backstagecapital.com/apply, you can apply for funding, and it doesn't have to be something necessarily that's open. Like we do have an accelerator that we started in 2019 that is on a break right now. But it doesn't have to be something going towards something. It's just an open application process. When I started early, I had office hours 1 day a week where people could set up a Calendly and get on a call with me, and having no background or anything, any connection to me. And that was when I had nothing. So when I think about how much we were able to be, like I personally, and then the team that I started to build around me, how accessible we made ourselves, even though that means thousands of messages a week from different platforms. when we have nothing, when we are just like skating on like the thinnest ice when it comes to resources. That's why I will not accept when a $1 billion plus fund says that they have a problem finding founders. We found 7,000 of them and invested in 2%. So you can't come to me with that, right? So yeah, I think the difference is that we mean what we say, we care to do it, we are challenged by it, and we walk into the challenge rather than skirt the challenge.
I love it. All right, so this is a question for the entire panel from the audience. Samantha, thanks for sending this in the chat. If anyone else has questions, send them in there. We'll make sure. This is an amazing opportunity to get to ask these people that are top industry experts a question. So definitely don't be shy. But the question for the panel from Samantha is, we constantly hear about grinding nonstop and no sleep when it comes to entrepreneurship. And I know that can especially be true in industries like finance. But what are all of your views on this live to grind or grind to get to the top kind of thing? And has that changed over the years as you've progressed in your careers?
Who would you like to go first?
How do you want to do this?
Yeah.
Here, Jeff, why don't you jump in? Go ahead, Jeff.
All right. So I love that one for two reasons. Entrepreneurs like to brag, everybody, but especially entrepreneurs, about how hard they work and how long they work. And let me tell you something. It's not a badge of honor to work around the clock. It's a badge of inefficiency. When I start, for every one of my companies, my goal was to be able to do in 2 days what it took everyone else the whole week to do, so I could have the rest of the time to actually be a human being, live, be around your friends, take care of your family, go visit your parents. You should not sign up to work your life away. You should sign up for a 360-degree life, and you should work smarter, not harder. Now, that being said, when it's time, here's the thing about entrepreneurs in particular. When it's go time, we go. Right? I've pulled double and triple all-nighters until I just fell asleep at the chair. When you have to get it done, you grind, but don't accept that as a lifestyle and don't make it as a lifestyle. I remember back in the early internet days. In fact, we were talking about this. I did an event yesterday, this weekend, with that I spoke at with Vint Cerf. He's the guy that invented the internet, and Nolan Bushnell, the guy that invented Atari and hired Steve Jobs. And we were talking about the whole reason for the creation of all these technologies was so that you could have a life, right? When I was starting, I remember back in the early Priceline days when we were saying, if we build our business right, it should run itself and we can be home. And we can be making money while we're sitting at home because that's what technology enables you to do. So grind when you have to grind, but the real win is when you can do in 2 days what everyone else takes the whole week to do, and you can spend the rest of the time raising a family, hiking, whatever it is you personally want to do.
Thanks for that. Laurie, let's go to you. What are your thoughts on the grind in the corporate world?
Yeah, I would actually say exactly what Jeff did. I've found that, like, if I'm working on a product launch or if I'm working on an acquisition or a divestiture, right, I might put in long hours for a specific period of time, but always setting an endpoint for myself and saying, at this point, either, the contract is signed or the deal is done or whatever, then I have to take time and kind of win back that time that I spent working and spend time with my family or doing those other personal things. So 100% agree it applies the same corporately as it does for entrepreneurs.
What about you, Laura? As a younger professional in a demanding industry, do you feel more of a pressure to need to put in more time than people, or what are your thoughts on the corporate grind?
Yeah, I would say it's overly romanticized. I was on a board call for a portfolio company last week, and the founder said something along the lines of, we were pushing back on just how many initiatives and product launches were in the pipeline for him. And he was just trying to assure us that it wasn't taking away from his team's time, it was taking away from his time, and he wasn't sleeping very much these days. And I loved the response of the board of just absolute stopping the conversation and saying, wait, no, we need to double click on this. This is not acceptable behavior from a CEO. You do not get to deprioritize your own time. And it was just the way that he was talking about it was very kind of startup world of, I'm not sleeping these days. But just you're not going to be able to run an efficient company that is focused on empathy towards the end consumer. Like, you will definitely be able to get stuff done on little sleep or high stress, but you are not able to connect emotionally with the people that you need to connect with. And so thinking about your customers or your members or your employees, you will audit, like, no matter what, and you will short circuit someone. And so you might think that it's just hurting yourself, but it's not as a CEO. And then I think for me personally, I think as a young person, it is really tempting to buy into this. I need to prove myself through these long hours, through, putting in just the constant work. And I think there's a value to that. There is a value to getting work done, and there's a value to, there's still things that I need to learn. And so it's going to take longer for me to do them than it will for me in a few years. But it also goes back to Jeff's point of constantly reframing it of, is this efficient, or am I putting hours in to show people that I'm putting hours in? Am I sending emails at this time of night because I want people to know that I am putting in the effort? Or am I actually prioritizing my whole life and my my long-term career and sustainability, specifically in these high pressure environments? I want to be in this for the long haul. And so how do I set myself up for success right now in efficiencies, not just more hours?
Yeah, I think those are all great points, Laura. Anything else that you'd like to add to what everyone has said, Arlen?
Well, everybody has said it so well. I would just say, like, telling me how many hours you worked in a week doesn't impress me, but telling me how many naps you took in the middle of the week, that does impress me. I enjoy that. I enjoy a good nap. I refresh. There's a difference between busy and productive. And anybody can be busy. Anybody can, fill their calendar up and be all over the place. And I love the whole grinding thing, because if you think about grinding, if it's some sort of wheel, like back in the old times, there's a wheel and you're grinding the wheel, it has a finite amount to it, right? So if you do that every single day, it's just going to go away. You're not going to have any more to give. But if you do that every once in a while when you need to, I love that framing of it. And also, I think I wrote this blog post a few years ago that was not related to tech, but it was just related to me learning about this about myself. And I think it was called Save Yourself, Save the World ? Because I used to think that giving all of myself first, and then everybody getting the pieces, and then I give to myself last, was the way to do it. But you have to give to yourself first so that you can be there to give to others. And so absolutely it has to be from the top down, that sort of, not only as an example to other people, but the way you treat people. I know when I am tired or when I'm frustrated or stressed, I'm shorter with people. I don't have much of patience with people. And that can turn into like not a cool environment for your team if you're snappy. And also I think it's good to also note and to really understand too that not every single person has the luxury of being able to figure out what their time is like. Like, for instance, all of the grind till you die or sleep when you die, all that stuff that I see on Twitter or startup land usually comes from like 25-year-old white dudes. And who have not yet started a family, or have, but they're not really the caregivers at that point.
Tell them
And
to have a kid and they'll sleep when they die. Let me tell you about that. I can give those 20-year-olds a little tip about sleeping when they die. You don't need to be grinding diapers one day. You'll want that midday nap like you were talking about.
Yeah, well, it's also proven that getting a lack of sleep takes years off of your life, like a cigarette, smoking would. That's been scientifically proven over the years. But it really is, it's kind of like this privileged position to put yourself in a place where you have to grind, like where you're creating work for yourself, when there are people out there who their livelihood and the fact that they can like put food on the table for their family is dependent sometimes on having to work more hours because they make less. And so to come into this privileged world of people like, yeah, we're gonna stay at the office, and we're gonna stay play ping pong for longer, it just drives me crazy. And it's something that it is one of those bad habits that a lot of people pick up on, no matter what their background is and their profile is, because they believe that that's what it takes to make it work. And what the one of the strongest things I can do for myself, and what I see other people do who I really respect this way of leadership, is you can take time away and put that on your calendar as not only just spending higher quality of life with your family, but like strategizing. You can save months of heartache and going in the wrong direction by spending several days thinking things through and strategizing better and not acting and reacting so quickly. So all of those are like really, good points about everything that was said on this panel. If I had seen this panel, I'd be like ready for like the next nap, and when can I do, like we even did at our company when COVID hit, I said Fridays are off now, because we don't need to add stress. We need to figure out a way to take away stress.
I think all great points by everyone on the panel. So we have a couple minutes left. We want to wrap up a little bit early to give people a second to step away if they haven't yet, if they have been to all the presentations before we start the next amazing presentation. So maybe just go through. We can start with Laurie, and each of you just give your top piece of advice or maybe action step that people could take if they're interested in, getting into a successful career in finance or looking for venture capital. Whatever your take is, what someone watching right now, what is your advice to them to take action on today?
I would just say keep balance in mind as you're thinking about what you want out of your career. So for me, I've never looked at what's the next job I want by title. I've looked at what do I want to get out of that job. And I think that applies to the finance industry, but also to the entrepreneurial world that you guys were talking about as well.
Amazing. What about you, Laura?
This maybe isn't my top piece of advice, but I think it's the most relevant piece of advice. And to founders out there, I would say, hold venture capital accountable. This is a space that there's a lot of change happening right now. And I think there is, I'm maybe a little bit nervous about that it'll kind of drop off of people's radars. But the reality is that you as founders, you have the power to look for and reach out to people like Arlen who are prioritizing changing this industry. And so I know that is not always easy. That is not always, when you want to start a company, it is, just who will hear the pitch and buy in. But I think there's a lot of accountability and pressure that can be put on venture capital to change and to start investing in more women, start investing in more people of color, have women investors. It's happening, but there is so much further that we all need to go as an industry. And so we all need to keep each other accountable.
Great points, Laura. What about you, Jeff? What's your big takeaway for other people?
So I'm gonna focus after I've been looking at the questions in the chat for people, because I don't come out of finance, I come out of tech. But so I'm going to talk about the getting funding piece of that, and I'm going to say this, which is do your homework. Too frequently, people take meetings with somebody because their business card says investor and their website says investment fund, except you would never pick customers that way. You spend forever analyzing and segmenting customers and researching and making sure you got the right ones. We, as people that are seeking funding, don't tend to do that with investors. So, I mean, going to somebody like Arlen is a very, very obvious one, right? She's many times more likely to have the empathy you need and understand you because of her own journey than many of the funders out there. But there are also plenty of good male-run, female-run funds of every different kind and people of every different kind. So do your homework. A quick example of that is we ran an accelerator program that we called the Girl Effect. We teamed with Nike just to find women who weren't getting funding and fund their businesses. Through that network, I noticed other people said, hey, we found some people that are not judging us based on anything except the merit of our idea, you should go to them. So many of the people that came to us came through the network. So what I'm telling you is, this is for all the listeners. You guys got to share. When you find people that are good to go to for funding because they represent the right values, get the word out and make sure that those are the people that other women are seeking funding from, so that we support the people that support us and we stop giving pitches to the people we shouldn't be doing business with anyway.
All excellent points. Thank you. Jeff, or Arlen, excuse me. What do you add to this? What is the final wrap-up takeaway? Financing, funding, women. What is the big thing they can do?
Sure. I think one thing we don't talk about a lot as founders who are looking for capital, especially in your pre-seed and seed stages, is who is going to do well if you do well. So think about, piggybacking off of Jeff's comment about vetting investors, not only for the experience, which of course I think is very important, but thinking about who do you know that your company is going to do well. That's what you're working towards. Whoever puts an investment in you stands to make multiples on that. If not their own capital, the carried interest, profit share that they're going to get. Who do you want to win with you? Again, it's about repurposing power and leverage. And that will help you make a lot of decisions too. So the vetting of investors is so important. I agree. And remember, there are back channels and back channels of back channels. So you can do some research that's not what meets the eye online. And nothing stays too hidden, good and bad.
I love it. All amazing points. Thank you so much to Arlen Hamilton, Jeff Hoffman, Laura Sievert, and Laurie Winger from CUNA Mutual Financial Group. And thank you to CUNA Mutual Financial Group and Cmfg Ventures. Again, amazing partner and supporter of women in financial leadership and entrepreneurship. So go to their website, check out their exhibit booth, an amazing organization that's doing incredible things that both Laura and Laurie mentioned briefly today. But I appreciate all of you being here so much. It's so incredibly helpful to hear all of your insights. And we'll see Jeff and Arlen later for the pitch competition live this afternoon. So make sure to tune in for that. Otherwise, we will see you guys all in the next session. Thank you so much for being here, and thanks for your partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you.